The pregnancy test lay on the table between them. 2 pink lines. Positive. Daniel Adelik stared at the young woman sitting across from him in his Lekki mansion. Her name was Grace, and she was the waitress he had met 2 months ago in a moment of drunken madness. He had paid her 10 million naira for one night, believing nothing could ever come from it. The doctors had told him he was sterile. His ex-wife had left him because of it. But now Grace was pregnant. And the paternity test in his hand said the baby was his. How was this even possible? 6 months earlier, Daniel Adelik had everything a man could want. He owned hotels across Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. His business empire was worth billions. People called him one of the most successful men in Nigeria. But his wife, Blessing, didn't care about any of that anymore. She stood in their bedroom, her suitcase packed and ready by the door. Her face was hard and angry. "I'm leaving you, Daniel," she said coldly. Daniel felt his world crashing down. "Blessing, please. We can work this out. We can try again." "Try what?" she snapped. "We've been to every hospital in Lagos. Every doctor said the same thing. You're sterile. You can't give me children." Daniel's hands shook. "But I love you. Doesn't that mean anything?" Blessing laughed bitterly. "Love doesn't give me a family. I married you to build a life, not to waste my time with a man who can't even give me one child." She picked up her suitcase and walked toward the door. "Blessing, wait." But she didn't stop. She didn't even look back. The door slammed shut and Daniel was left alone in the big empty house. For the first time in his life, all his money and success meant nothing. After Blessing left, Daniel fell apart. He stopped going to work. He stopped answering phone calls. All he did was drink whiskey and stare at the walls of his mansion. His business partners sent messages. His mother called from Enugu, worried and begging him to talk to her. But Daniel ignored everyone. He felt like a failure. A man who had everything but couldn't have the one thing that mattered. One night, after finishing 2 bottles of whiskey, Daniel stumbled into a small hotel bar in Victoria Island. His vision was blurry and his mind was clouded with pain. That's when he saw her. A young woman sat alone at a table near the corner. She wore a simple uniform and looked exhausted. She was a waitress who had just finished her shift. Daniel's drunken mind twisted reality. He thought she was someone else. Someone he could pay to help him forget his misery for just one night. He walked over to her table, swaying slightly. He pulled out his phone and transferred 10 million naira to her account right there. "Stay with me tonight," he said, his voice slurred and desperate. "Just one night. Please." The woman, her name was Grace, stared at him in shock. She looked at her phone and saw the money. 10 million naira. More money than she had ever seen in her life. Grace's mother was sick in the hospital. The doctors said she needed an expensive surgery or she would die. Grace had been working 3 jobs but she still didn't have enough money. Now this drunk stranger was offering her exactly what she needed. With tears in her eyes and shame in her heart, Grace nodded. The next morning, Daniel woke up with a terrible headache. The hotel room was empty. Grace was gone. He barely remembered what had happened. All he remembered was the pain, the whiskey, and a woman's face. He tried to forget about it. He told himself it was just one terrible mistake in a life full of mistakes. But 2 months later, Grace showed up at his mansion. She was shaking and nervous. When Daniel opened the door, he barely recognized her. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. "And the baby is yours." Daniel felt like the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. He stared at Grace, unable to speak. The words she had just said didn't make sense. "That's impossible," he finally whispered. "I can't have children. Every doctor told me I'm sterile." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't believe it either. But I took 3 tests. They're all positive. I haven't been with anyone else. Only you." Daniel's mind was racing. This couldn't be real. Blessing had left him because he couldn't give her a baby. He had accepted that he would never be a father. But now this stranger was standing at his door, telling him everything the doctor said was wrong. "I need proof," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "A paternity test. We need to be sure." Grace nodded quietly. "I understand." 1 week later, Daniel sat in a private hospital in Lekki, waiting for the results. His hands were sweating. His heart was pounding. Part of him hoped the test would be negative so his life could go back to normal. But another part of him, a part he didn't want to admit, hoped it would be positive. The doctor walked in holding a brown envelope. His face was serious. "Mr. Adelik," the doctor said, "the results are clear. You are the father." Daniel couldn't breathe. The room felt too small. Too hot. He looked at Grace, who was sitting quietly in the corner. She looked scared and tired. "How is this possible?" Daniel asked the doctor. "I was diagnosed as sterile years ago." The doctor shook his head. "Sometimes those diagnoses are wrong. Or conditions can change over time. Medicine isn't always perfect, Mr. Adelik. What matters now is that you're going to be a father." Daniel left the hospital in a daze. His entire world had just turned upside down. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Grace and the baby growing inside her. He thought about Blessing, who had left him because she believed he was useless. He thought about all the pain and loneliness he had felt for months. But now, everything was different. The next morning, Daniel called Grace and asked her to come to his house. When she arrived, he sat her down in the living room. "I know this wasn't planned," Daniel said. "And I know we don't really know each other. But that baby is mine and I'm going to take responsibility." Grace looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm going to take care of you and the baby," Daniel said firmly. "I'll pay for everything, the hospital bills, baby clothes, food, everything. And I want you to move in here." Grace's eyes went wide. "Move in? But you don't have to worry about anything," Daniel interrupted. "This house is big enough. You'll have your own room. I just want to make sure you and the baby are safe." Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay. Thank you." Grace moved into Daniel's mansion the following week. At first it was awkward. They barely spoke to each other. Grace stayed in her room most of the time and Daniel buried himself in work. But slowly things began to change. Daniel started coming home earlier from the office. He would ask Grace how she was feeling. He bought her fruits and made sure she ate well. When she felt sick in the mornings, he would bring her ginger tea. Grace was surprised by his kindness. She had expected him to treat her like a burden, but instead, he treated her with respect and care. One evening, Daniel came home with bags full of baby clothes, toys, and books. "I didn't know if it's a boy or girl yet," he said, looking a bit embarrassed. "So I bought both." Grace smiled for the first time since moving in. "You didn't have to do all this." "I want to," Daniel said softly. "This baby is a miracle. I never thought I could be a father. I'm not going to waste this chance." As the weeks passed, Daniel and Grace spent more time together. They would sit in the living room and talk about their lives. Grace told him about growing up in Ibadan, about her sick mother who had finally gotten the surgery she needed, and about her dreams of becoming a teacher. Daniel told her about his business, his failed marriage, and how lost he had felt before she came back into his life. Slowly, something unexpected began to grow between them. It wasn't just responsibility anymore. It was something deeper. Something real. But just when things were starting to feel right, Daniel's phone rang one night. It was Blessing. His ex-wife wanted to see him, and she said it was urgent. Daniel stared at his phone after the call ended. Blessing wanted to meet him at a restaurant in Victoria Island the next evening. She said she had something important to tell him. He hadn't spoken to her in months. Not since she walked out and left him broken. Now, suddenly she wanted to talk. Grace noticed the worried look on his face. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Daniel forced a smile. "Yes, just some business issues. Nothing to worry about." But inside his mind was troubled. What could Blessing possibly want after all this time? The next evening, Daniel arrived at the restaurant. Blessing was already there, sitting at a corner table. She looked beautiful as always, wearing an expensive dress and jewelry. When she saw him, she smiled, a smile that used to make his heart race. But now, it just made him uncomfortable. "Daniel," she said warmly, "thank you for coming. Please sit down." Daniel sat across from her, keeping his face neutral. "What do you want, Blessing?" She looked down at her hands. "I made a mistake, Daniel. A terrible mistake. I've been thinking about it every day since I left." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "What are you talking about?" Blessing reached across the table and tried to take his hand, but he pulled away. Tears filled her eyes. "I lied to you," she whispered. "About everything." Daniel's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "The doctors never said you were sterile," Blessing said, her voice shaking. "I paid one of them to write a false report. I made it all up." Daniel felt like he had been punched in the stomach. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because I wanted out of the marriage," Blessing admitted. "I thought I could find someone better. Someone more exciting. But I was wrong, Daniel. I've been miserable without you. I realize now that you're the only man I've ever truly loved." Daniel stood up so fast his chair almost fell over. His hands were shaking with anger. "You destroyed me," he shouted. People in the restaurant turned to look. "You made me believe I was broken. You made me hate myself. I'm sorry. Blessing cried. I'm so sorry, Daniel. Please forgive me. We can start over. We can try again. We can have children together now. Daniel laughed bitterly. You think I would ever take you back after what you did? Blessing stood up and grabbed his arm. Please, Daniel. I still love you. We can fix this. We belong together. Daniel pulled his arm away. No, Blessing. We don't. I'm done with you. I'm building a new life now and you're not part of it. He turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Blessing crying at the table. When Daniel got home he was still shaking with anger. He couldn't believe what Blessing had done. She had ruined his life with a lie, and now she wanted him back like nothing had happened. Grace was in the living room reading a book. When she saw his face she stood up quickly. Daniel, what's wrong? He sat down heavily on the couch and told her everything. About the fake medical report. About Blessing's lies. About how she wanted him back. Grace listened quietly, her face full of sympathy. When he finished she sat down next to him. I'm so sorry she did that to you, Grace said softly. But maybe it was meant to happen this way. Daniel looked at her, confused. What do you mean? If she hadn't left, you wouldn't have met me, Grace said, placing her hand on her growing belly. And this baby wouldn't exist. Sometimes the worst things lead us to the best things. Daniel felt something warm spread through his chest. She was right. If Blessing hadn't left, he never would have found Grace. He never would have discovered he could be a father. He reached out and gently placed his hand on Grace's belly. For the first time he felt the baby kick. You're right, he whispered. This is where I'm supposed to be. Grace smiled, and in that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't just about the baby anymore. They were becoming something more. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Grace grew even closer. They laughed together, cooked together, and talked late into the night. Daniel found himself looking forward to coming home every day, just to see her smile. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset from the balcony, Daniel took Grace's hand. I never thought I could feel this way again, he said quietly. After Blessing left, I thought love was dead for me. But you've changed everything. Grace's eyes filled with tears. You've changed everything for me too. You saved me and my mother. You gave us hope when we had none. Daniel leaned closer. Grace, I know this started in the strangest way possible. But I don't care about how it started anymore. I care about where we're going. Before she could respond, his phone rang. It was his gate security. Sir, there's a woman here demanding to see you, the guard said. She says she's your wife. Daniel's jaw tightened. Blessing was at his gate. And she wasn't planning to give up without a fight. Daniel told the security guard not to let Blessing inside. But 10 minutes later she was somehow standing in his living room. She had sweet-talked one of the house staff into opening the door. Grace was still on the balcony when Blessing walked in. Daniel stood up quickly, anger flashing in his eyes. How did you get in here? He demanded. Blessing ignored the question. She looked around the house like she still owned it. This is still my home, Daniel. I have every right to be here. This stopped being your home the day you walked out, Daniel said coldly. You need to leave. Now. That's when Blessing noticed Grace stepping in from the balcony. Her eyes went to Grace's pregnant belly, and her face twisted with shock and rage. Who is this? Blessing asked, her voice sharp. That's none of your business, Daniel said, stepping between them. But Blessing pushed past him and walked right up to Grace. You're pregnant? Is that Daniel's baby? Grace stepped back, frightened by the anger in Blessing's eyes. Please, I don't want any trouble. Blessing laughed cruelly. Trouble? You're already trouble. Do you know who I am? I'm his wife. Ex-wife, Daniel corrected firmly. We're divorced, Blessing. You left me, remember? Blessing spun around to face him. We can fix that. We can get back together. But not if you're playing house with this nobody. Don't you dare speak to her like that, Daniel said, his voice dangerously low. Blessing's eyes filled with tears. How could you do this to me, Daniel? I came back for you. I admitted I was wrong. And you're choosing her over me? You made your choice months ago, Daniel said. Now I'm making mine. I choose Grace. I choose this baby. I choose the family I'm building. Blessing's face went red with fury. She pointed at Grace. She trapped you. She got pregnant on purpose to steal my life. That's enough. Daniel shouted. You need to leave right now or I'll call security to remove you. Blessing looked between Daniel and Grace, her hands shaking with anger. Then she turned to Grace with a cold smile. Enjoy it while it lasts, she hissed. He'll never truly love you. You're just a replacement. A cheap copy of what I was to him. Then she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows shook. After Blessing left, Grace sat down on the couch, her whole body trembling. Daniel knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I should have never let her get close to you." Grace wiped tears from her eyes. "Maybe she's right. Maybe I am just a replacement." "No," Daniel said firmly. He lifted her chin so she would look at him. "Grace, listen to me. What I feel for you has nothing to do with Blessing. You're not a replacement. You're the real thing." Grace searched his eyes. "Do you really mean that?" "I mean it with everything in me," Daniel said. "Grace, I'm falling in love with you. Not because of the baby. Because of who you are. You're kind, strong, and you've brought light back into my life." Fresh tears rolled down Grace's cheeks, but this time they were happy tears. "I'm falling in love with you too, Daniel." Daniel pulled her into his arms and held her close. For the first time in years he felt complete. The next morning, Daniel went to his office with a new determination. He called his lawyer and his assistant into his office. "I want to make an announcement," Daniel said. "Today. I want everyone to know that Grace is going to be my wife." His assistant looked surprised. "Sir, are you sure? What about all the gossip? What about Blessing?" "I don't care about gossip," Daniel said. "And Blessing is my past. Grace is my future." That afternoon, Daniel sent out a press release to all the major newspapers and business channels. He announced that he was engaged to Grace and that they were expecting a child together. Within hours, the news was everywhere. Daniel's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Some people congratulated him. Others were shocked. But Daniel didn't care what anyone thought. When he got home that evening, he had a surprise for Grace. He had bought her a beautiful engagement ring, a simple but elegant diamond that sparkled in the light. He got down on one knee in the living room. "Grace, I know we haven't known each other for very long," Daniel said. "But I know my heart. And my heart belongs to you. Will you marry me?" Grace covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Yes, Daniel, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her. It was a kiss full of promise, hope, and love. But their happiness was short-lived. The next day, Blessing saw the announcement on the news. She was at her friend's house in Ikoyi when the story came on television. Her face went pale, then red with fury. She grabbed her car keys and drove straight to Daniel's office building in Victoria Island. She marched past security and burst into his office. "You proposed to her?" Blessing screamed. "You're actually going to marry that girl?" Daniel stood up calmly. "Yes, I am. And you're trespassing." "Security." 2 security guards rushed in, but Blessing wasn't finished. "This isn't over, Daniel. You think you can just replace me and live happily ever after? I'll make sure that never happens." The guards grabbed her arms and started pulling her toward the door. She fought against them, screaming. "You'll regret this, Daniel. Both of you will regret this." As they dragged her out, Daniel felt a cold chill run down his spine. Blessing wasn't going to give up. And he had a terrible feeling that things were about to get much worse. Over the next few weeks, Blessing seemed to be everywhere. She showed up at Daniel's office building, demanding to speak with him. She called his phone dozens of times every day until he had to block her number. She even followed him to business meetings. But the worst incident happened at the bridal shop. Grace had gone to a boutique in Lekki to look at wedding dresses. Daniel's mother had flown in from Enugu to help her choose. It was supposed to be a happy day, a special memory. Grace was trying on a beautiful white gown when Blessing walked into the shop. "Well, well," Blessing said loudly, drawing everyone's attention. "Look at the little waitress playing dress up." Grace froze. Daniel's mother, Mrs. Adelik, stood up immediately. "Young woman, you need to leave right now." Blessing ignored her and walked straight up to Grace. "That dress is too nice for someone like you. You think putting on a white gown makes you worthy of Daniel?" Grace's hands were shaking. "Please just leave me alone. You stole my husband." Blessing shouted. "You got pregnant on purpose to trap him. Everyone knows it." Mrs. Adelik stepped between them. "That's enough. My son divorced you because of your lies. You have no one to blame but yourself." Blessing's face twisted with rage. She reached out and grabbed the wedding dress Grace was wearing, pulling hard on the fabric. "You don't deserve this." Blessing screamed. The shop attendants rushed over and pulled Blessing away. Grace burst into tears and Mrs. Adelik held her close. Security was called and Blessing was escorted out of the shop. But the damage was done. Grace was shaking and crying and the beautiful dress was torn. When Daniel heard what happened, he was furious. He drove straight to Blessing's apartment in Ikoyi and banged on her door. When she opened it, she smiled. "Daniel, I knew you'd come back to me." "Stay away from Grace," Daniel said, his voice cold and hard. "Stay away from my family, or I'll get a restraining order against you." Blessing's smile faded. "A restraining order? Against me? After everything we had together?" "Everything we had was built on lies," Daniel said. "You destroyed our marriage yourself. Now you're trying to destroy my future, but I won't let you." "She's not good enough for you," Blessing cried. "She's just a poor nobody. I'm the one who stood by your side when you were building your empire." "No," Daniel said quietly. "You stood by my side when it benefited you. The moment you thought I was useless, you threw me away. Grace has shown me more love and loyalty in a few months than you showed me in years." Blessing's face crumpled. "Please, Daniel. I made a mistake. Don't I deserve a second chance?" "You used up all your chances when you lied about me being sterile," Daniel said. "We're done, Blessing. Forever. Accept it and move on." He turned and walked away, leaving her crying in the doorway. The wedding was planned for a month later. Despite Blessing's interference, Daniel and Grace refused to let her ruin their happiness. The ceremony was held at a beautiful garden venue in Lekki. Family and friends came from all over Nigeria. Daniel's business partners were there, along with Grace's mother, who had fully recovered from her surgery. Grace looked stunning in a new wedding dress, even more beautiful than the one Blessing had torn. Her baby bump was now visible beneath the flowing fabric. When Daniel saw her walking down the aisle, his eyes filled with tears. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They exchanged vows under a flower-covered arch. Daniel promised to love and protect Grace and their child for the rest of his life. Grace promised to stand by him through everything. When the pastor said, "You may kiss the bride," Daniel pulled Grace close and kissed her tenderly. Everyone cheered and clapped. But even on his wedding day, Blessing couldn't stay away. As the reception was starting, she showed up at the entrance. Security tried to stop her, but she pushed past them and walked into the garden. Everyone went quiet. Grace's hand tightened on Daniel's arm. Blessing stood there in a black dress, her makeup smeared from crying. She looked at Daniel and Grace standing together, and something in her finally broke. "I just wanted to say..." Blessing's voice cracked. "I'm sorry." Everyone stared in shock. "I'm sorry for everything I did," Blessing continued, tears running down her face. "Daniel, you deserve better than what I gave you. Grace, you didn't steal him. I threw him away. And I've been miserable ever since." She looked around at all the guests watching her. "I came here to cause trouble. But seeing you both together, I realize I've already lost. Not because of Grace. Because of my own selfishness and lies." Blessing turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at Daniel one last time. "Be happy, Daniel. You deserve it." Then she walked out of the garden and disappeared into the night. Daniel pulled Grace close and she rested her head on his shoulder. For the first time since Blessing came back into their lives, they could finally breathe. The reception continued with music, dancing, and laughter. But as the night wore on, Grace suddenly grabbed Daniel's arm. "Daniel," she whispered. "Something's wrong." Her face had gone pale and she was holding her stomach. "What is it?" Daniel asked, panic rising in his chest. "The baby," Grace said, her voice tight with pain. "I think it's coming." Daniel's heart nearly stopped. "But it's too early. You're only 7 months pregnant." Grace gripped his hand tighter as another wave of pain hit her. "I know, but something's happening. We need to go to the hospital. Now." Within minutes, Daniel had Grace in his car, racing through the streets of Lagos toward the nearest hospital. His mother sat in the back, holding Grace's hand and whispering prayers. "Hold on, Grace," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "Just hold on. Everything will be okay." But inside he was terrified. After everything they had been through, after finally finding happiness, he couldn't lose her or the baby now. At the hospital, doctors rushed Grace into the emergency room. Daniel paced outside, still wearing his wedding suit. His mother sat nearby, praying quietly. Hours passed. Every minute felt like an eternity. Finally, a doctor came out. Daniel jumped to his feet. "How is she? How's the baby?" The doctor smiled. "Congratulations, Mr. Adelik. You have a healthy baby boy." Daniel felt his knees go weak with relief. "And Grace?" "She's tired, but she's fine," the doctor said. "It was a premature birth, but both mother and baby are stable. You can see them now." Daniel practically ran into the room. Grace was lying in bed, exhausted but smiling. In her arms was a tiny baby wrapped in a blue blanket. When she saw Daniel, tears filled her eyes. "Come meet your son." Daniel walked slowly to the bed, his vision blurry with tears. He looked down at the small, perfect face of his baby boy. The baby had his eyes and Grace's nose. "He's beautiful," Daniel whispered. "You're both beautiful." He gently kissed Grace's forehead, then carefully touched his son's tiny hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his thumb, and Daniel felt his heart overflow with love. "I never thought I could have this," Daniel said softly. "A wife who loves me. A real family." Grace smiled through her tears. "We're your family now, Daniel. And we always will be." The next few months were the happiest of Daniel's life. Baby David grew stronger every day. Grace recovered well from the birth. They moved into a new rhythm as a family. Daniel cut back on work to spend more time at home. He loved being a father. Every morning he would wake up early to feed David while Grace rested. He changed diapers, sang lullabies, and couldn't stop taking pictures of his son. But Blessing wasn't finished trying to destroy their happiness. 2 months after the wedding, she showed up at Daniel's office again. This time she brought newspapers and magazines with headlines about Daniel's scandalous new marriage. "You think you've won?" Blessing said, throwing the papers on his desk. "Everyone's talking about how you left me for a poor waitress. Your reputation is ruined." Daniel barely looked at the papers. "I don't care what people say. I have everything I need at home." "You're making a fool of yourself," Blessing shouted. "That woman and that baby have destroyed everything we built." "No," Daniel said calmly. "You destroyed what we built. Grace and David saved me. Now get out of my office." Blessing's face went red with fury. "This isn't over, Daniel." "Yes, it is," Daniel said. He picked up his phone and called security. "Escort Mrs. Blessing out. And make sure she's never allowed back into this building again." As security led her away, Blessing screamed threats and insults. But Daniel didn't care anymore. Her words had no power over him. That evening, Blessing went to Daniel's house one last time. She banged on the gate, demanding to be let in. Grace was inside with the baby when she heard the commotion. Daniel's security guards called him at the office. "Sir, your ex-wife is here again. She won't leave." Daniel drove home immediately. When he arrived, Blessing was still at the gate, screaming, "Let me in. I need to talk to Daniel." Daniel got out of his car and walked up to her. His face was cold and stern. "Blessing, this has to stop. You're harassing my family." "Your family?" Blessing laughed bitterly. "That waitress and her baby are not your family. I'm your family. We were supposed to grow old together." "We're divorced," Daniel said firmly. "You left me because you thought I was useless. You lied about me being sterile. You tried to ruin my life. And now you want me to feel sorry for you?" Blessing's eyes filled with tears. "I made a mistake, Daniel. Just one mistake. Why can't you forgive me?" "Because you're not sorry for what you did," Daniel said. "You're only sorry that it didn't work out the way you wanted. You're not sorry for the pain you caused me. You're just sorry that I moved on." Inside the house, Grace was watching from the window, holding baby David. Blessing saw her and something inside her finally broke. She looked at Grace holding the baby. She looked at Daniel standing protective and strong. She looked at the home they had built together. And for the first time, Blessing truly understood that she had lost. "I can't do this anymore," Blessing whispered. "I can't keep fighting for something that's already gone." She wiped her tears and took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Daniel. For everything. For the lies, for the pain, for all of it." Daniel nodded. "I accept your apology. Now please move on with your life and let me live mine." Blessing looked at him one last time. "Goodbye, Daniel." She turned and walked away. This time she didn't look back. 2 weeks later, Daniel received a letter. It was from Blessing. Inside was a simple note. "Daniel, I'm leaving Nigeria. I've accepted a job offer in London, and I think it's time for me to start over somewhere far away from here. You were right about everything. I was selfish and cruel, and I destroyed the best thing I ever had. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry. Take care of Grace and your son. They're lucky to have you. And you're lucky to have them. I hope you find all the happiness I couldn't give you. Blessing." Daniel showed the letter to Grace. She read it quietly, then looked up at him. "She's really gone," Grace said softly. "Yes," Daniel replied. "She is." Grace reached out and took his hand. "Do you feel sad?" Daniel thought about it for a moment, then shook his head. "No. I feel free. I feel like the last shadow from my past has finally disappeared. Baby David made a happy sound from his crib, and both Daniel and Grace smiled. Life moved forward peacefully after that. Blessing never came back. Daniel's business continued to grow. Grace enrolled in university to study education, pursuing her dream of becoming a teacher. And little David grew bigger and stronger every day. One Sunday afternoon, Daniel and Grace sat in their living room watching David play with his toys on the floor. The baby was laughing and babbling, trying to stand up on his wobbly legs. "Look at him," Grace said, smiling. "He's growing so fast. Just like his mother," Daniel said, wrapping his arm around her. "Strong and beautiful." Grace leaned her head on his shoulder. "Daniel, do you ever think about how everything happened? How we met?" "All the time," Daniel said. "And you know what? I'm grateful for all of it. Even the painful parts." "Really?" Grace asked, surprised. "Really," Daniel said. "If Blessing hadn't left me, I never would have met you. If I hadn't hit rock bottom, I never would have found my way to the real happiness I have now. Sometimes God uses our worst moments to lead us to our best blessings." Grace smiled and kissed his cheek. "You're my blessing too, Daniel." David crawled over to them and pulled himself up using Daniel's leg. Daniel picked him up and held him high, making the baby giggle with delight. "This," Daniel said, looking at his wife and son, "this is what real wealth looks like. Not money or houses or cars. This right here. Well, family. People who choose you every single day." Grace stood and wrapped her arms around both of them. "And we choose you, Daniel. Today and always." As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of their home in Lagos, Daniel Adelik realized something important. True love wasn't about perfection or grand romantic gestures. True love was built on choice, honesty, and kindness. It was about showing up every day even when things were hard. It was about forgiveness and second chances. His first marriage had ended in lies and betrayal. It had broken him and left him believing he was worthless. But that painful ending had opened the door to the family and future he was truly meant to have. Grace had come into his life at his lowest moment. She hadn't asked for anything except what she needed to save her mother. She hadn't trapped him or tricked him. She had simply accepted his help, carried his child, and along the way shown him what real love looked like. And baby David, the son doctor said he could never have, was proof that miracles still happened. That sometimes the things we think will destroy us actually set us free. Daniel looked at his wife and son, and his heart was full. He had everything he had ever truly wanted. Not because life had been easy, but because he had been brave enough to choose love when it appeared in the most unexpected way. And that made all the difference. We've come to the end of today's story. I hope it touched your heart. Thanks for watching and staying with us till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?